I live in a remote residential area of Saratov. I take the streetcar to and from work every day. As in many other Russian cities, our city's electric transport is going through bad times. In the heyday of streetcar traffic in Saratov, there were 3 depots. The last one, Leninskoy, opened around the middle of the 1980s. There was even a line for passenger traffic to it. It was actively used by residents of nearby houses. The streetcar route number 11 was extended as a result. The terminus was moved from the Geological College to depot number 3, adding several more kilometers to the route. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Leninskoy streetcar depot was in operation for a short time, and in the early 2000s it was abandoned. Streetcar No. 11 began to turn around at its old terminus near the Geological College. The rails and wires from there to the depot were eventually partially dismantled. I use that streetcar every weekday. The fact that the route was cut doesn't bother me much. I get off a few stops before the college. But once I missed my stop. It had been an awful week at work. By Friday night I felt like a lemon. The sleepless nights had done their job. I felt like I could even fall asleep standing up. Since I had to stay late at work, I rode home in a half-empty streetcar. Well, that's good, I thought, getting comfortable on the window seat. The conductor came over, I paid the fare, and immediately fell asleep to the sound of the streetcar's wheels. I woke up because the conductor was announcing on the microphone. The streetcar has arrived at its terminus. The train won't go any further. Please vacate the carriage. There was no one in the carriage but me. I couldn't see anything through the streetcar windows. It gets dark very early in late autumn. I got out of the car and decided to wait for the streetcar to leave, as I had to cross to the other side, and then go back to my stop. The streetcar left, and I froze in place. It turned out that they didn't take me to the Geological College terminus, but to an abandoned depot. I realized this by the outlines of dilapidated buildings and sleepers scattered in a chaotic manner. I've read about the abandoned Lenin depot on the internet, and I've seen pictures of what's left of the streetcar depot. So I recognized the place. I had never been so scared, not even because I got there, where I could not get in purely theoretically, but because I was afraid to meet the guards there. I am sure they would not be impressed by the story of how the streetcar brought me to the depot, which had stopped working 10 years ago. They would have taken me for a common lover of easy profits, such as those who steal and sell metal. I ran around the depot in a panic, trying not to make any noise, and eventually ran out into the lighted street. How I managed to do this, I have no idea, pure chance. Noticing the sign on the first private house I saw, I called a cab to the address. While the car was on its way, I did not take a step away from the gate. 10 minutes later, which seemed an eternity to me, the cab arrived. Soon I was home. But in spite of my fatigue, I could only fall asleep in the morning. All night on the internet I searched for information about this abandoned tramway branch and ghost streetcar. The next day I walked around the area and made sure I definitely couldn't get to the depot by streetcar, simply because the rails were missing and the streetcar pylons had been removed and adapted to their needs by the enterprising Saratov locals. This incident forever discouraged me from sleeping in public transport. I don't know where a fallen asleep passenger will end up. This story happened to me 6 months ago. My brother and I, ages 18 and 16, found a website that had instructions on how to summon spirits. I was an atheist at the time. I didn't believe in anything, but this story changed my point of view. It went like this. We found an article, How to Summon a Ghost Train. We read it. The ritual had to be performed by only 2 people at a time. First, one person had to stand near the pillars next to each other at Proletarskaya station. Tap 22 times on the pillars with his hand, then say 3 times, "Ghost train, come." So we did. After that, nothing happened. My brother began to wait. Since I am an atheist, I did not believe that anything would work, but for the sake of interest I agreed to do the invocation with my brother. After about 2 minutes we saw a train, an old one, a retro train I think it was called. It pulled up without much noise. The doors also opened silently. But there was absolutely nobody on the train. This made me wary. Also, I saw that passers-by didn't enter it. I really felt uncomfortable, I wanted to leave, but my brother began to insist. Okay, the website said that those who called stayed alive. I took the first step toward the doors with difficulty, and then something grabbed me and pulled me down, and I fell to the floor of the station. I saw my brother get on the train, the doors close, and the train very slowly and noiselessly sail off into the lane. I screamed at the top of my lungs. After about 4 seconds, I woke up on a bench. My brother and some 2 other people were bringing me to consciousness. When I finally got better, my brother told me that he had also seen that train, so I didn't dream that part, and then I stood there staring at the train, not moving my pupils, nothing. After that, I screamed, looking at the car doors, and then I fell unconscious. They were bringing me to my senses for about 7 minutes, and while they were dragging me to the bench, my brother noticed the train starting to drift noiselessly away into the tunnel. At that time I yelled out, "Don't go, I care about you." After that, I began to believe in otherworldly powers. Only after that incident did I often lose consciousness, talk to myself, and have mood swings. I was taken to the hospital. 2 weeks later I made a full recovery and was discharged. I never suspected in my life that such an incomprehensible and terrible thing would happen to me. This story happened to an acquaintance of mine. He lives in Minsk. As a child, when we met more often, we sometimes talked about paranormal topics. We didn't see each other for 10 years. We crossed paths a few times and corresponded on the internet. And once in one electric train we were going home. It was not crowded, and during the long ride home he told me a story. One day my friend was taking the subway home from work. There weren't many people in the train, but all the seats were taken. He sat in front of the seats, holding the handrail, thinking about something of his own. He ran his eyes over the announcements and advertisements posted in the allotted places, looked at the passengers, crossed his life with the life of the beauty sitting opposite, dreamed about what could be if, thought about what he would do in the evening, in general, tried to occupy his time during the trip as much as he could. Then I stared out the window, glimpsing the walls of the tunnel and reflecting the passengers sitting behind me. My friend began to look at them. A stately elderly man was sitting there, well presented for his age. Then there were girl students going to the university. He was just on his way, and a citizen with a pile of bags and luggage, overloaded with them, like a shuttle driver in earlier times. And who is that? Some strange guy, wearing a decrepit gray coat, some kind of dark skin, a stupid hat with fields, and he looks directly into the reflection, right in the eyes. My friend did not take his gaze away, began to look at the stranger with his eyes. His face was lean, elongated, massive cheekbones, sunken eyes, stubble, wide and coarse nose. He kept looking straight into his eyes through the reflection in the glass of the subway car. And then something happened that made my friend remember for years to come that our world is not that simple. The stranger's face began to distort. His jaw went down. His mouth opened wider than possible, 2 or 3 times wider. His jaws began to shift in different directions. His mouth twisted, and his eyes were still looking at my friend. My friend shuddered. He didn't understand what was happening, though for a moment he thought it was the distortion in the curved windows of the subway. My friend sharply turned around, and something happened that made his legs buckle. A cold sweat broke out, and his eyes went dark. There was no one in the place of the strange passenger. There was an empty space. Instantly he turned around and stared at the reflection, and there was no creepy fellow traveler either. The stranger was gone. After this incident, my acquaintance, according to his story, was terribly afraid to look at the reflection in the subway and in the mirrors, he said. Like, he was leaning over the sink to wash his face, and when he raised his head, he unwittingly afraid to look into the mirror, lest he saw there something equally frightening. It's been 3 years since that story, but it must have been a stressful incident, because I noticed a slight but perceptible change in the behavior of the comrade. He became more twitchy, wary. I don't know how true the story is, but when I heard it firsthand, I never once doubted it, because it was told so emotionally that it was easy to believe.